I'm going to do something I normally don't do. Is I'm going to give you a full section of a roundtable on This Week with George Stephanopoulos because I think it's pretty relevant. So here we go.
And then you've got the Republican establishment. They're very exercised. We're shocked that somebody could be loose with the facts. Or distort someone's record. Shocked. How can you be shocked? This is the guy, remember, who was sure that I was born in Kenya.
That's President Obama's explanation for the rise of Trump. Let's talk about this now on our roundtable, joined by Matthew Dowd, our political analyst, Jorge Ramos from Univision, also author of the new book, Take a Stand. Congratulations on that, Jorge.
Thank you.
And Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard, Republican strategist, and Democratic strategist, our analyst, Donna Brazil. Welcome to you all. And Matthew Dowd, this has been a pretty remarkable 48 hours in a already remarkable campaign. Let me ask you the question I asked Marco Rubio. How did we get here?
Well, it has been a remarkable 9 months, but I actually think this has been long in coming. I mean, I think Donald Trump's language in the course of these events and what he's done along that has set America back to a degree. But Donald Trump didn't create the divisions that are in America. Donald Trump is exacerbating the divisions that are in America. And instead of using healing language, he's using language that incites in the court of this. I think, you have to give Donald Trump a credit for some things. He is speaking to a group of voters that feel unheard of in Washington, D.C. They feel unheard of by the GOP establishment on many different issues, on trade, on jobs, on a lot of different things. But Donald Trump is doing it in a way that is not bringing the party for sure together, and it's not bringing the country together.
And Bill Kristol, how much has he been enabled? You saw Marco Rubio say it was the media's fault. Okay, let's take some responsibility in the media as well. How much has he been enabled by Republicans themselves who refused to take him on earlier?
He's been considerably enabled, both in a sort of technical sense or tactical sense that they were busy. The Bush super PAC raised, what was it, $120 million? And how much of that was spent against Donald Trump? I think $5 million. $25 million against Rubio. If Rubio's going to lose in Florida Tuesday, which he may rally to win, but if he loses, part of that is because the Bush campaign dropped $20 million of negative ads on him in Florida. And Cruz and Rubio spent more time fighting each other than fighting Trump. And in the broader sense, the failure to really denounce Trump. And I think Rubio missed a huge chance 2 weeks ago. Remember at the end of that debate, about 10 days ago, when he was asked, well, can you still support Trump? He could have said, look, when I took that pledge in August, I thought I would support the Republican nominee. I never expected a Republican nominee to say the kinds of things that Donald Trump has said. And now I've got to say, honestly, I'm not sure I can. I think if he had just crossed that bridge, it would have been a dramatic moment. He might have alienated a few people who want to support the Republican nominee no matter what. But I think a lot of the non-Trump voters, who are 65% of the Republicans who voted so far, would have rallied to Rubio.
And then the question, Jorge Ramos, is, you've seen this kind of rhetoric from Donald Trump since the beginning of this campaign, his announcement well back in June. Where does it go next? Can it be contained now that this violence has kind of been unleashed?
You know, what I've been asking is, where were all the candidates 9 months ago? I mean, he announced June 16, and where were they? Where was the press asking the tough questions? Right. I mean, he was as hateful and divisive when he said that Mexican immigrants were rapists and criminals and drug traffickers. And where was the press? And where were the candidates? Where were the political parties? Where was the government? Where was the government of Mexico? And so who is surprised now? I am not. Who is surprised that he's being confronted in rallies right now? People are saying, well, if the political establishment decided not to confront him, now we're going to do it. And that's exactly what we're seeing.
He said what I want to say in English, and I wish I could say it in Spanish, because where the hell was the political leaders, George, when he made those, what I believe, the insulting statements about Mexicans? Donald Trump is amplifying everything that we've heard on talk radio for the last 8 years, Matt. You know that. There's not one AM channel, whether I'm home in the South or riding up in the Northeast. They've been saying this kind of dog whistle, everybody is the problem, and people have not taken responsibility. I denounce Donald Trump for not denouncing the kind of vitriol, the kind of violence that he has perpetrated with his angry rhetoric, and he knows exactly what he's doing. This is not the Donald Trump who denounced David Duke in 1991. This is a guy who's now soaking up this hate, and he's spilling it back out.
Is there strategy here?
Well, I think Donald Trump does everything by gut and everything viscerally, so I think that's what he does. I don't think this is a strategy, and I don't want to become the Donald Trump apologists, or the media's apologists in the course of this. Voters have the information about Donald Trump. They've had it for a year. It's not as if the media should have done more, asked more questions. They know what Donald Trump said about Mexican Americans, and they know what he said about immigrants. They know what he said about Muslims. They know all the language he used. He is on TV saying the things that he's saying for months and months and months and months. They're not without information. There are a huge segment of voters in this country that feels frustrated.
Let me ask you the question I asked Jorge. Now that he's unleashed it, can he dial it back? And must he or not?
Well, I think the China's broken. In the course of this, I think the Republican Party is now fractured forever. Whatever the result of this is, and it's not going to be Donald Trump that I think pulls this back together. Somebody else is going to have to come in and pull this back together. If they do, Donald Trump right now is a likely Republican nominee. He's not going to be able to pull the majority of the country together and say, I'm now the one that's going to be the unifier in this. It's very hard to do that.
Can I say one thing about this? Who did give a speech who's a prominent Republican taking on Trump? Mitt Romney. An impressive speech, and a speech motivated by conviction, I believe. And what was the general reaction of smart political observers? Oh, boy, what a mistake. And doesn't he understand people hate the establishment? Why is he giving this speech? And one very prominent Republican told me the day after, wrong speech, wrong time. You know, if everyone calculates in that way, then no one steps up.
Well,
where is Paul Ryan? I mean, and I think it's a matter of honor. It's a matter of the honor of the Republican Party and of the conservative movement. Now, it's not about whether, gee, if I speak up, maybe people won't like me as much, or I'll antagonize 6 voters who are on the fence with Trump. And I do think that's what's happening.
I think the problem is not the problem is it looks like to many people are stepping on Donald Trump voters, right? They're stepping on blue-collar people that have felt left behind by the Republican Party for 20 years. That's what they feel like. So when you come out, many of this establishment comes out and speaks against Donald Trump, the voters feel like you're not listening anymore.
95% of those voters voted for Mitt Romney. They voted for Paul Ryan.
I think it's way too late. It's very dangerous when a presidential candidate attacks a group, minorities or women, the way Donald Trump did it. When he ejected me from a press conference, and by the way, the only time I've been ejected from a press conference was Fidel Castro in 1991. So Donald Trump did exactly the same thing. When he said, go back to Univision, those are code words. And just a few seconds later, somebody told me, get out of my country. Well, I'm also a U.S. citizen. But here, that's exactly the kind of rhetoric and hatred that he's been promoting. He's been all over the place, and nobody reacted on time. Right now, I think it's way too late.
You all seem to agree it's too late for the Republican Party, but I want to pick up on one thing. Matt, you said he's the likely Republican nominee, but let's dig into that a little bit. Coming into this Tuesday, 5 big states coming up. We've got some charts here that shows what happens, what he'll need to do if he wins both Florida and Ohio. Let's put that up first. If he wins both Florida and Ohio, he has to win 54% of the delegates left. But look at the difference if he splits. If he wins Florida but loses Ohio, he has to win 60% of the delegates left, with the map shrinking, Bill Kristol. If John Kasich wins in Ohio, very good chance that Donald Trump cannot get the 1,237 delegates he needs.
Yeah, I think Kasich victory in Ohio is a must-win, and that holding Trump's margins down, or maybe beating him in Missouri, Illinois, where the delegates will split, is important. If Rubio could win in Florida, I would be pretty confident that Trump would not be the Republican nominee. If Ohio and Florida split, I think there's a pretty good chance to stop Trump. Yeah, I agree. People are being much too fatalistic, because everyone says, Donald Trump is a menace to the country. Donald Trump has stigmatized minorities. He's been horrible in his rhetoric in a million different ways. But 45% of the delegates are selected, so let's proclaim it over. I object to that. If he's a serious menace to the country, people need to fight him to the end.
But Bill, the delegate math works a little different on the Republican side, which are winner take all now kicking in on March 15th. By the end of this month, 65% of the delegates chosen on the Republican side, 50% on the Democratic side. By the time we get to the 426 of the Yankee primary, Pennsylvania, et cetera, 75%. So the math will not help Rubio or Cruz or Mr. Kasich. It only benefits Donald Trump from this point on.
If they beat him, I mean, look, Arizona's winner take all. Do you think it's not inevitable? Donald Trump has gotten an average 35% of the votes so far. It's not inevitable that Donald Trump wins winner take all Arizona, that he wins winner take all Wisconsin.
Well,
if it's likely, it can be made less likely by serious Republican speakers. Where's the Speaker of the House from? Wisconsin. Will Paul Ryan tell the voters of Wisconsin, you should not vote for Donald Trump?
That's a good question.
But I think most of the elected officials that have come out against Donald Trump have ended up losing in the course of this. And most of the elected officials that come up for any candidate have ended up losing in their states in the course of this. I think the number that 1237 is a number Donald Trump probably has a hard time getting to, but here, let's get this scenario. Donald Trump gets 1,100 delegates, which is not...
That's very reasonable. I agree.
And he is 300 or 400 delegates ahead of the second place person, which is very reasonable in the course of this, and he's won 29 states. What do you do at a convention then? The natural thing to do is you go to the leader. Oh, now you're going to say to his millions of voters, and these people are very angry and very upset, said, oh,
Okay, let's complicate it a little more. Let's say everything you just said is true. Assume everything you just said is true, but the violence we've seen this weekend continues through July in Cleveland.
Well, I think it's actually going to continue, and I think you're going to see violence now at Democratic events. I think what's going to come out of this, not because of Democrats, but because people, Trump supporters and other things, you showed up at ours, we're going to show up at yours. I think this only gets worse.
I'm not sure about that, but I think it is Donald Trump who's been inciting the violence. He says he hasn't been inciting the violence, but he said Alabama, November, maybe he should have been rough up about a protester. Las Vegas in February, I would like to punch him in the face. Michigan, March, not hurt him, but if you do, I'll defend you in court. So I think...
He was on a college campus, George. I'm on college campuses every week. These are community organized. This is not just a professional class of leftists. I wish leftists were so professional as to organize at this level. These are local people. These are people who do not like the rhetoric coming out of Donald Trump. He has to figure out how to put the genie in the bottle. He may not figure it out, but I think that's what the American people are calling upon him to rise to the occasion and not continue to evolve in this.
I have to say, the protesters in this instance in Chicago and maybe going forward have done no good service in the course of this. They have done nothing to heal the country in the manner which they say they want to do. They come in, they act in a very disruptive, violent way. It doesn't help people that want to defend the First Amendment. Donald Trump has said some outrageous things, but in that instance, in that time, the protesters, I think, did nothing but help.
They're nonviolent protesters. They also
They're
have
not
the
nonviolent
First Amendment. They also have the first
flag.
Look, Matt, you don't be, you're throwing your hands at me. Be cool, boo. I mean, I'm not the other one.
No, I
who
mean,
likes
it's not true. They were
no,
nonviolent.
many of them are nonviolent protesters. They're coming in. That Muslim woman who stood there in silence. Okay, they're coming in with their First Amendment rights as well. But I don't condone violence. I'm a Martin Luther King type. I don't condone the kind of violence, but I do believe that people are reacting to the language and the vitriol from Donald Trump. That's what's happening.
And in Chicago, 20% of Latinos, don't you think that they are responding to Donald Trump saying, you know, we don't want at all what you're saying?
But I don't think it's never, I think, good if you say we need to heal the country, we need to unify the country.
Violence.
To respond violence with violence.
I agree. Nobody's
We will all agree on that point. Have to take a quick break, and we're taking a look at President Obama's shortlist for the Supreme Court.